Well, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order since it's not likely we'll have anyone dial in. So good evening, everyone. It's good to see everyone in the conference room this evening. It's Tuesday, September 6th, 2022, and this is the meeting of the Templeton CSD Board of Directors. May we have a roll call, please?
Directors English.
Here.
Bardonish.
Here.
Bardini.
Here.
Logan.
Here.
And Peterson.
Here. Okay, if you will, join me in the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. The order of business, we don't need to poll resolution 2022 since we have no board members participating remotely. Would any board members like to change any of the order of business this evening? There are 2 items on our new business. Okay. Then special reports. Unfortunately, Commander Stewart from CHP is not able to join us this evening, and I don't believe we have anyone participating from the Sheriff's Department, so no reports this meeting. Public comments, we have no public, or do we have one member of the public on the call? Okay, well, welcome. And for the member of the public that's on this call this evening, you may address the board on any item of interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board that's not on tonight's agenda. In compliance with the Brown Act, the board cannot discuss or act on the item not on the agenda. However, board members or the district staff members may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed by the public. Additionally, on their own initiative or in response to the question posed by the public, a board or staff member may ask a question for clarification. Further, the board may request staff to report back to this body at a subsequent meeting concerning any matter or to take action to direct staff to place an item of business on a future agenda. So with that, I'll open it up for any public comments on items not on tonight's agenda. And if you would like to address the board, you may do so now. Okay, seeing that there's no desire to address the board with public comments, we'll move to the consent agenda. There are 7 items on this evening's consent agenda. Item A is the minutes from our regular board meeting on August 2nd, 2022. And since Director Giardini was not present for that meeting, we'll pull that and vote on it separately. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the August 2nd, 2022 meeting? Oh, okay, so we have a motion made by Director Bardonish. Sorry, I didn't see you or hear you. And I'll second that motion. So may we have a roll call, please?
Directors Bardonish.
Yes.
Logan.
Aye.
English.
Yes.
Bardini.
Abstain.
And Peterson.
Yes.
Okay, so the remaining items on the consent agenda are the treasurer's report from June 2022, resolution number 20-2022, and this is to allow for continued remote meetings for board members to participate via Zoom. And this is in compliance with AB 361. The next item is D, the fire station repairs budget, and this is consider approving the budget amendment to the funds to repair the fire station. Item E is the MIG contract change budget amendment, and consider approving the MIG contract change along with a budget amendment in the amount of $7,500 for the ADA design changes for Everett's Park. Item F is the wastewater samplers budget amendment. Consider approving a budget amendment for funding the purchase of wastewater samplers. And item G is authorization to supplement the fire equipment. Consider approving authorization to surplus fire equipment that is no longer in use. Any questions from members of the board regarding any of these items?
I did have a question on item D.
Okay,
I don't want to pull it, but I just wanted to clear, I wasn't sure. The original damage estimate was $3,000. That was just to repair the damage from the accident. But during the investigation, or the repair of that, we found that the extent of the rot was significantly more.
That was just the emergency repair was the 3,000, just getting him out there that night.
Oh,
It was just to seal the building.
okay, all right. Thank you.
any other questions? Okay, member of the public, you have an opportunity to ask any questions on any of these items under the consent agenda. Do you have any questions at this time? Okay, seeing that there's no questions, I'll bring it back to the board. I'll make a motion that the board approve consent agenda items B, C, D, E, F, and G.
Second.
Okay, a motion made by Director Logan and seconded by Director Peterson. May we have a roll call, please?
Directors Logan,
Aye.
Peterson,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Bardonish.
Aye.
And Giardini.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes 5-0. Moving now to new business, the incentivize for the water unit relinquishment program. The board will discuss options for reinstating the incentivized water unit relinquish program. And this is something that we did attempt to do a few years back. But I'm going to turn it over to our general manager to provide some additional background information.
Yeah, thank you very much. The board had discussed a couple of times consideration of altering our relinquishment program to something more akin to what was temporarily available in 2015. I'll just provide a little bit of a background. I try to give you quite a bit of information in staff report. I think there are some key issues that we'd like to discuss so that if you want to proceed with this, we've got some firmer direction on some of the points. But just by way of a background, generally speaking, when a party purchases a water unit for assigned to a parcel, the code required that unit be used within a certain period of time, dating back 30 years. But the district was lax in its enforcement of that, and in many cases, water units have been assigned to parcels that remain not in use for many years. That there is an option in the code that allows the property owner to essentially return the water unit. And the program that stands today and the one that's for most of the district's history essentially required the property owner to pay a $500 processing fee. And if they wanted to relinquish the unit, the district would then go follow the wait list, find a party that wanted to have that unit assigned. The district would resell the unit, and only after the district receives the money, then we pay the original owner, property owner. They don't have to be original, but the property owner associated with the water unit in question, what they paid originally, or what the amount was paid originally. And some of these water units were, many of them that are outstanding were like $2,400 or relatively modest sum. There's not a lot of interest in relinquishment. We get an inquiry a couple times a year, maybe. Recognizing that this wasn't very attractive, in 2014, the district was considering some pretty significant changes to the water code. The primary one being that these units would have to become connected at some point, couldn't just hang out there forever. And so the mechanism that was used, or that was implemented by the district, was a hard date by which the units either had to be connected physically or virtually. The virtual part came later. Or if the property owner chose not to, they could continue to own the water unit. But if they didn't connect by December 31st, 2018, the unit became subject to, the water unit became subject to what we now call the water capacity fee, which is the difference between what they paid for the water unit originally. Again, that could be something like $2,400 and the current connection fee, which is right now is $41,000. So it was a pretty substantial additional cost. Most of the, so at the time that was implemented, the board wished to also implement another tool to sweeten the deal, so to speak, for persons to use the relinquishment program. And what that essentially was eliminating the processing fee, eliminating the need to wait until the unit was sold, because the district actually bought it back instead of resold it, and then it would have been resold, and providing the equivalent of the LAIF interest rate as interest on the money since the unit was originally purchased. And the LAIF rate was selected at that time. We had spent quite a bit of time to working this program out. Our legal counsel was concerned about we proposed internally various mechanisms to provide some sort of return on that fund. And ultimately, we settled on the LAIF interest rate because it was an investment tool that the district had available during this period of time. It still does. And so our legal counsel's opinion was, well, if you could have earned the money, the district could have earned the money, then it wouldn't necessarily be considered a gift of public funds to offer that in return, because that's what the district would have earned if that money was in LAIF. So that's why that vehicle was chosen. And I went back and looked because there was Director Trinity had kind of comment about LAIF interest rates and how that might compare to CPI. And unfortunately, I don't have a table to show you, but the LAIF interest rates varied considerably. And so like in the late 80s, LAIF interest rates were 8.7%, 9%, 8. Late 80s, the early 90s, LAIF interest rate was really high, would have certainly beat CPI during that period of time. It fell during the latter 90s, but still remained pretty competitive, 4 and 5%. So again, higher than our traditional 2 or 3% CPIs. And then it was in the 5% range all through the 4 and 5% through the 90s and early 2000s. But then in the early 2000s, it like 2002, it fell like 2.75%, and 2003 just below 2%, kept falling. So from like 2002 to 2005, it was in the 1 to 2% range, and then improved a little bit, and then actually before the recession, before 2008, it climbed back up to 5%, but then it just tanked following the recession. Went below 2%, and then from 2009 all the way to until 2017, it was under 1%. It began to recover a couple years ago, but the 2.5, 2.7, 2.5%. So it really is kind of all over the place. There were pretty decent returns for many of those years, but it would likely depend on when the unit was bought. So we developed this little tool back at the time that we could enter in the date that it was bought and the amount, and determine how much interest would be added to the value. Nonetheless, in 2014, this was adopted by the board as a part of this package of code changes, this incentivized relinquishment program. And it did generate a little bit of interest, but nobody actually followed through with it. So no relinquishments followed that model. In the district, it lapsed. It was good for 1 year, then it expired. So it was set up that way. It was a temporary thing. But since then, there have been a handful of relinquishments. Again, a call every, not often. And then occasionally somebody will relinquish water units. More recently, though, we've had some additional interest, and there's been some discussion, I think, by some property owners that said, well, really the circumstances have changed, and maybe this would be something that would kind of maybe move the needle. The difference between what occurred in 2015 while the program was available and what's the circumstances today is back then, the water unit was a sort of a sunk cost. I mean, the person had paid for it and I think most people just decided, well, maybe it'll do me some good someday, so I don't want to return it for that amount of money. But these days, most of these units, as you know, have become connected mostly by the virtual meter agreement. And so they're each water unit's costing them about $28 a month today. So it's a real expense that they see, maybe not a big one, but a real expense that folks see. And I think that has led some property owners to think a little bit further about it. We have one, I know of 2 property owners that are contemplating relinquishment now, and because the one inquiry came just like a couple weeks ago, I said, well, the board is gonna discuss this enhanced program, and you may want to wait to see if the enhancement takes effect because it would be beneficial. Nonetheless, that's what the program was like before, and you know, so I don't know if this is going to create I don't think it'll create a lot of relinquished units. It might be enough to move the needle for some folks. I guess one way of looking at it is if you enhance the program, there's kind of maybe no down, as long as you're comfortable with the way it's enhanced and it doesn't get used, there's probably not a downside other than the cost and time it takes to alter the program. And if it does move some folks and we get some more relinquishments, those are units that get you know, kind of turned in the system and become available to other property owners who are still waiting for units. So I kind of just sort of teed up some questions that I thought were important for the board to kind of discuss, because there's about 8 or 9 points that I wanted to make sure we had a good sense of where we were going before we started drafting the actual code changes to implement that the board could later consider for formally consider for him that would later be implemented. And so I'm looking at the bullet points that start on the bottom half of the second page of the staff report. They're not numbered, but like the first one is, should refunded amounts under relinquishment need to wait until units are reassigned, or should the district pay those refunds directly as was available in the previous incentivized program? We recommend using the tool that we had back in 2015, it was used. There's a couple of reasons. One, I think it's a better, if somebody walks in, we can process a relinquishment and tell them what checks can be issued, instead of saying, well, we don't really know, it could take some time to actually resell the unit. And 2, it allows us then to treat these new units just like we're releasing anything else, and property owners can enter, have a little more time to make a decision, and they can enter into a 5-year payment program, which has some tools in it, has some that has some value to the district. The property owner has to meet those obligations, like applying for a discretionary project and meeting the deadlines for completing that process. And if they don't, the district, using that agreement, can essentially take back the units and make them available to somebody else, so they don't become stuck on a parcel. So I included a copy of that agreement for in the staff report in case you wanted to go through it. This may not be the big difference is the district would have to actually allocate funds in the budget to buy the units originally. We'd have to have an authorization to do that, and then they of course would be resold. But I think it's a if we were willing to just cut a check instead of having to have the property owner wait, it might get some folks to, there would be more certainty about how fast the program would work.
Before we get into some of the options that you and the issues that you've laid out, for the benefit of the public that's on the call, can you provide, and I also want to see if the board has any questions also before we kind of delve into problem solving, kind of outline the objective here, because we have really no water units to provide somebody that comes into the office, the district, and asks for a water unit. But we have, what, close to 600 water units that are not yet really connected.
Right, so we
So
have,
we're really
we have
trying to solve
this,
that problem.
I think that the concept is maybe if the relinquishment program were more were utilized, we could serve some of the persons that have been on the wait list for obviously for many, many years.
Yeah.
And some of those property owners, might be more willing to put the units to use. I say units to use, connect them, build something, use water, you know, instead of just being.
And
held
these
on.
are property owners that have taken multiple units in thoughts of what they would develop, some of whom have used the units that they needed for the development, but they still have excess units in their possession that we're looking to have them possibly relinquish to the district so that we could resell them.
Yeah, there's a litany of circumstances.
Yeah.
Some people have mostly a fully developed site with extra units that they've just decided it was maybe more beneficial to hang on to them than relinquish them under the current program. Or there might be some future time when they could develop something more intensely or more densely. Some property or many of the properties are just 100% vacant and haven't proceeded with any sort of development, at least not yet. And of course, some are in the some sort of planning process, whether they where it looks like they're more likely to be used in the, I don't know, 5 or 10 years or something, but they're kind of all over the place. You know, some are attached to properties with a single family home where, and that was necessary 5 and 10 years ago before the ADU rules came about. Some are vacant residential, some are vacant commercial or likely to be commercial developments at some point. And again, others are part of properties that would appear to the average person to be fully developed, but not to say that there couldn't be a more intense development. So they're kind of all over the place. But yes, the relinquishment, the reason I think the board wanted to revisit this is it might generate it might free up some water units to go to folks that are waiting and have been waiting patiently.
Any questions from board members at this time? Yes, Director Giardini.
I have a question. What is the number of water meters on the 20-some year waiting list in total? Do you probably know approximately or off the top of your head?
Yeah, I can look it up. We do have the water wait list now posted online and application for it. This is as of March. I don't think they're getting new ones since. So the number of individual parcels is 139. The number of water units is 1,647. However, while the parcel count is obviously accurate and the totals, the math is correct, the units that are requested on the wait list are probably not a very good indication of the actual demand. A lot of property owners had requested just some awful round numbers, 10, 20, 50, 100, things that may or may not ever come to fruition. So as some of these property owners have been on the wait list for many, many years, maybe their plans might have changed or I think really we have to be closer to offering the units to determine how many they would actually take. So I don't know that I think the number of 1,647 is inflated, but I don't know if it's by 2 times or 3 times or 20%.
Well, and the state laws have changed that increased development drastically. The SB 9, is that right? That allows for increased density, and then your tract map or parcel map automatically gets approved by increasing density, actually makes the density counts on the parcels go up. So I don't know if you could say it was increased by 2 or 3 times. It could be actually more than that number because of the current laws within the last 2 years that the government has passed. I mean, you've got Sani subdivision that's using that portion, and I don't know who else locally, but I'm sure there's other developers, because I don't do much in Templeton, that are using it in Templeton to increase their density. It's all legal. It's quite a bit of a bonus, so and that's on residential lots and residential multifamily lots. So I don't know, I mean, right.
Yeah, it's hard to tell.
It's hard to tell, but also since that count, what I'm saying is that the laws promoting housing have allowed the planning departments to increase their density quite a bit.
So I think the other thing to consider when you look at the wait list, so it's a big number. It's, obviously when people ask about it, it could be very, discouraging if you're not on here and when can I get water? And it's, well, I don't know, but you're better off getting on the list than not. Is really how long have they been there? The highest one on our list, which we've served a couple of times, has been on the list since 1995. So you're talking about 27 years ago. 96, 97, 99, 2000. So we have 10 parcels that have been on the list since before the year 2000. Not a lot of new parcels have come on the list, but some have, a handful a year. So, there's, I think the list provides evidence of demand, clearly, and that goes without saying. I don't know that the demand is what's represented here, but, if water units were made available through relinquishment, which doesn't mean that there wouldn't be other ways of getting units built, just like we've released several over the last couple of years, we've released additional units. But if the relinquishment process were more effective in making more units available, that would just be another tool of serving the wait list and knocking, getting deeper into the list.
Before we move any further, any other board members have questions? Okay, I'm going to open it up to members of the public. I know that this may be a new topic for you, and I would encourage you to ask questions so that you can follow along with what the issue is that we're trying to solve for here. If you have a question now, please go ahead and ask. Okay, seeing that there's no questions, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to continue with this. And I just want to periodically check in with members of the public.
Are we going to have questions as we go? My computer just won't like. As we go through each one, or are we going to have Jeff complete?
I just wanted to kind of, after he gave the background, is kind of pause and allow the public to kind of make sure that they're grasping what we're discussing, because I think we're a little familiar with it. But we have public joining the call, so I want to make sure that they understand the background and what we're trying to solve for.
Yeah, I also have a question on process as well. So, there are a number of bullet points that the general manager is asking us to weigh in on. Would it be best to make that decision as we go, or wait until we go through them all and then go back and weigh in on each of them? I again wrote down my scorecard so I can tell you as we go.
Yeah, I would prefer that we do each one, unless
that
there's
was
a
my
preference that someone else has.
No, that was my
So
question.
with each one, let's have a discussion of what it is. And we'll ask questions. I'll open it up to members of the public to also weigh in. And then we can then bring it back to the board to kind of say yay or nay
Okay.
and provide direction to staff.
Yeah, I view these all as sort of somewhat unique. They're obviously related, but they're somewhat unique each point. So again, and I'm sorry if I jumped in here too quickly, but the first bullet point is really, should we just, do you think the program would work better if we essentially paid the unit back as opposed to waiting for it to be purchased through a relinquishment? And it's kind of technical, but our relinquishment process is quicker than the standard release, which is already quick with a lot of deadlines. But the relinquishment process gives people less time to make a decision if they're offered units following that process, as opposed to the district essentially, let's say Jane Doe owned a parcel that had 2 water units that were not in use, one relinquished one under the new program. We could just write her a check and then the unit would be processed in the normal way, or it could follow the enhanced relinquishment program. We could wait, we could wait to give her the money after it was resold. So our view is, if we want to make the relinquishment program more successful for the property owners that have the units, take away as many of the unknowns. And if somebody came in today to this new program, I could say, well, we're going to issue checks, on Wednesday, we'll have a check ready. Assuming there's a budget for it.
Yeah, so that's the question that I have is what is the budget?
Is there a cash flow problem?
Not in the water fund, no, I mean, not in the, we have a lot of water capital, I mean, in the I guess one way to look at it is you would, when you establish the budget each year, that would be sort of the telling sign about how much you had to work with. And you could always amend the budget, but we budgeted $1 million in 2014 and didn't spend a penny. So I mean, I think it's not likely to be a problem. It's not gonna run out of money because this isn't probably gonna be a big rush to relinquish. So we're gonna be able to return, resell these and replace the cash.
Questions, Director English?
No, I just, if you're gonna weigh in on, ask us our decision or our determination. I agree. I would love to see this move forward as quickly as possible, not have any hurdles. Make it as, put as much incentive as we can in this. So I think we need to put money in the budget. We're not losing that money. I would just set it aside for this. We can always add to it, and just be able to write somebody a check, because you don't want to give somebody an opportunity to back out. So if they say, well, you have to wait 3 months, then maybe circumstances change. So, buyer's remorse. So I would say budget it, put money in the budget, and make it happen. So.
I would agree because administratively it's cleaner. Because otherwise you would have to set up an additional process to track who are you waiting to refund, which I think just complicates the issue. Do you have a question, Director Giardini?
I think it got answered. I just had trouble with the second sentence. So you're saying that when somebody comes in and wants to relinquish their water rights, then they get paid the full amount at that time.
Yes, they get paid the relinquished, whatever that ends up being, but they get paid, when the district,
They'll get a check.
instead of waiting for that to be reassigned.
They get paid. Okay. Okay. Got it.
So that was gonna require, that's just the way we have to structure the program, and that's gonna require, a budget for this purpose. But I think that's all doable. We did it before, it just didn't actually take place.
Members of the public, do you have any comments on this particular issue of relinquishment in terms of providing a check immediately versus waiting until that relinquished water unit is resold? And if you have a comment on that particular item or question, you may unmute your phone at this time. Okay, seeing that there's no questions from the public, then we'll bring it back to the board. Any other additional questions or comments from board members? So direction for staff is what I'm hearing is that we agree with the staff recommendation to relinquish water units to be paid at that point in time, not pending the resale of that relinquished water unit.
That's if the whole board votes in favor of this program. Yes.
Okay. The next point really relates to the interest that was provided back in 2014. Again, the board was interested in kind of creating a carrot, a tool that would sweeten the deal, and we had developed a number of concepts at the time. And again, our legal counsel at that time was comfortable with this concept, which is we provide the interest that we could have earned on the money if we had the money in LAIF. We've been a member of LAIF for many, many years. I wanted to confirm that was also, that was what he wished to do. At the time, back again, 8 years ago, I guess, our legal counsel is very concerned that if we provided more than LAIF, there could be an argument that it was a gift of public funds. I have not, we spent quite a months kind of going through this with legal counsel back then. I have not re-vetted this issue because I felt like we arrived at a solid conclusion at the time. But if the board wishes to do something differently, we could re-vet the issue with our legal counsel to determine if a different instrument could be used.
Well, to me, this seems equitable because it's what the district would have received in the way of interest by holding those funds. And if now the person is relinquishing their water unit and looking for a refund, it seems as though that interest that has been accrued should also go back to that individual. And I think that also kind of sweetens the deal to incentivize the person to relinquish. Comments, thoughts, Director English?
I would agree. I think it's the key incentive above all else is making it palatable for somebody to actually turn it in. We're still going to be able to recoup those costs. And so there's very limited risk for us.
Director Giardini?
So I have a question on the table deck here. So March 1989, they bought a meter for 2,400. The 7,000 amount of refund, was that from the old table or was that?
No, we updated this through August 2022.
Okay, so that's, okay, so thank you for that. And then you didn't re-vet it with legal counsel, but we basically have the same legal counsel that we had back then.
Yeah, we have the same law firm. The attorney that was involved in this at the time has since retired. I think his counsel was generally conservative. I mean, it took a lot to get him to okay this at the time.
Right, and so would the new legal counsel consider CPI because this is, I believe, below CPI, which and they're going to say CPI is a gift of government funds.
Well, I think that's the argument they're going to try to, we're going to try to avoid reduce the risk of that occurring. I don't know. I think that the circumstances are going to be very, again, those interest rates back in the late 80s and in the early 2000s, there were periods of time when the interest was better than the CPI through LAIF. And there are certainly periods of time, like more recently, where it was below the CPI. So I think there could be like if you bought a water unit in 2015 or 2010, let's just say, the CPI is higher than LAIF interest rates since then. But I don't know if that's the case from 1989 forward. There might be winners and losers in that deal. And I don't know the reason we were ultimately able to land on this arrangement is our legal counsel felt like, okay, that was a tool we had available. We can argue that's what we earned on our money. Because we didn't, and I think the flip side of that is where could you have put the money and got CPI?
Okay,
But I don't know. I mean, I guess the issues, I think there could be circumstances when CPI might actually end up with a lower return.
or higher.
Or higher, yes.
So my question is, when a person purchases a water unit, what are they purchasing exactly? What is their property?
Well, I mean, these were referred to as, will serves or, a right to connect. They're really just paying into the system, right? They're not buying anything that's material. I mean, we refer to them as a water meter, like it's a physical thing, but that's a tool used to ultimately read the amount of water they use. But I think they're buying into the system so that when they do develop, they have a right to connect based on the number of units.
But they purchased the water. They purchased the water and the right to connect, because we're holding that water in our water table for them. And so,
Well, we are now. We certainly weren't for the 25 or so years before this, right? I mean, you know, but yes, today we're holding in reserve that capacity so that when that does connect, it's accounted for.
I just don't want us to get into legal trouble, because I think they purchased something of value that's a possession of theirs. And
Don't they just purchase the opportunity to use the water, because when they get the water, they're paying for it at the time.
But I think this is also not a forced relinquishment, it's somebody's choice. So
It's
they're gonna come in,
voluntary.
they're volunteering to get something, they're not gonna challenge us because we let them relinquish it, so
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't, so let's say we're talking about 600 or 700 of these that are unconnected and unused, and I think it's very doubtful that no matter what we come up with tonight and implement over the next couple of months, that a majority of those will become relinquished in the near term, certainly. I mean, most of these are probably gonna remain with the property owners that are out there. I guess, I think all of us are hopeful that if we improve the system for the benefit of the property owners, that it might generate more interest.
well, I don't disagree that it's volunteer. I just am questioning, is it a tangible materialistic good versus just a right? And by us holding on to that water makes it seem like it's a materialistic good. And so I'm just asking questions just to make sure we're thinking the whole thing through, because I do have a question that probably is not good now, but later on, regarding virtual water meters and what's gonna happen with those. Should we decide to reconnect, but we'll get there after this, because I
Well,
think we need to consider that too.
Keep in mind is what we're providing tonight is direction for staff. So they will still have to draft the policy, have legal review it, and then it come back before the board, at which time we will have a formal legal review of the policy.
You'll have a draft ordinance,
Yeah.
it would take it'll also take 2 readings before it's implemented, so.
So I think it's a fair question that can be addressed once we kind of give direction in terms of what we think is the most equitable way of dealing with this. And I think that's what's been outlined here. How do we want to move forward with regard to a policy? So it will still come back to the board at a later date for us to either accept or reject that policy.
And, okay, I'm just wondering if we should ask legal counsel what they've purchased.
Yeah, I think we've been through the issue, is this an entitlement, do they have an entitlement, and we've got legal advice, no, they haven't purchased an entitlement. It doesn't belong to them, it belongs to the district with these various conditions. But if you think about, maybe this is the way I can try to handle, this is the way I'll answer it and see if this helps. So we're talking about this $41,000 in today's money, right? That's what the water unit that's what the fee is. How is that calculated? Well, that's based on the district's cost for adding wells and pipelines and treatment capacity and those kinds of things per gallon of water. Really, the water, I guess we could argue that Nasi Meadow water is a little differently, but even then, we're not paying for the water. The water doesn't cost us anything. It's all about getting it out of the ground and delivered to the customer. So this is really infrastructure costs, or a little piece of for each unit, a little piece of infrastructure, an incremental component of infrastructure to make that water unit available. It's restrictive in Templeton's case because we only have so much water available. We can't keep adding. It's not as simple as just continue to add a well and that makes more water available, because it really doesn't. So like even in our Nasi Meadow water project, of which we're a participant, and that's more expensive water, if we think of it that way. We really aren't paying for the water. We're paying for the pipeline that was constructed to deliver the water. We're paying for the energy to pump the water here and to maintain that infrastructure. So the water itself is, you know, it really isn't a cost to the water. It's all of those other components.
And I would agree with that until we started holding water in reserve, because then we're holding captive something by keeping it in reserve. And so I'm just asking questions.
No.
Because I agree with everything you say, knowing infrastructure well. And so I just wonder if that changes because what we did by holding that water captive.
So I think on this bullet point, it's confirmed that the board wishes to pay interest at the local agency investment fund. And I think based on the table that you've outlined here, and I think that's the question for us. Director.
Support that. So if you're sure, asking for a show of hands, giving my hand.
Okay.
I guess I just have a question just to understand this a little better. So with the interest rates, going up, and I think this, they're thinking they're gonna raise them more. So is that gonna affect these rates here?
Yeah, this is a fluid process, right? We'll keep adding, so the table each month that goes by, will probably, actually they're done quarterly, but each quarter we'll update the interest rate. And then it's it would be fluid. This number, this is the number as of August 31st, but at the end of September, it'll be a few cents, dollars more.
Okay, so if it goes up, say 3%, which I don't know, but say over the next 6 months, it goes up 3%, it would only be 3% additional for these 6 months. It
Yes,
won't go all the way back.
Oh, yeah, it's real time.
Yeah,
right?
it's not retro.
Yeah, it's real time. So that's why it's a little bit fluid and so we had built this sort of spreadsheet to help answer questions back in 2014 and we've updated it. So I think we can do that again, like if somebody were to come in and let's say this, because this can take a few months before it's actually in place, but let's say in January, someone comes in and they say, well, I have this water unit that I bought XYZ date. How much would I get back? We could, plug the number in and give them an answer.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
All right, I'm going to open it up to any members of the public that's on the call this evening. Do you have questions on the second bullet point where the staff is recommending that the board pay interest at the local agency investment fund for those relinquished water units? And if you have a question, feel free to unmute your phone and ask your question of the board or the general manager. Okay, seeing that there's no questions at this time, I'm going to bring it back to the board. I agree with the staff's recommendation on this particular item, and I know Director English, you have felt the same. And Director Peterson also agrees. Director Frodonish, you're acknowledging you agree as well. Director Giardini, are you in agreement with this one? I know you had some questions, but are you in agreement with the concept here?
Partially. All right. Well, just because I think that if it's not an actual
Tangible.
thing subject to CPI, then I would go with this, but if this is,
I kind of look at it as I buy stock in a corporation. I don't have anything tangible,
either do I.
but I
know.
do have those stocks that I'm able to trade for a value. So I see this as something similar to that. So.
Yeah, but we don't let our water meters get traded at value.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my.
It's a buyback.
It's a buyback. Well, I'm in terms of having something tangible. So it is a buyback program. Okay, so the next bullet point.
Yeah, so on the next page, I've just listed, discuss whether or not the incentivized relinquishment should include the monthly fees paid under, typically, I'll say the virtual meter agreement or zero use meters since January 1st, 2019, which were the date the units were required to be connected or become subject to the water capacity fee under ordinance 2014-4. This additional amount would be $1,173 through last month. This came up a month ago or so when we talked about some of our meetings, some of our strategic goals, this concept of could we offer this? So we did vet this with legal counsel and they have advised that this could be a policy that you could make available. It doesn't harm anybody else. They actually haven't used any water. They're essentially paying the virtual meter fee or the base rate to avoid later paying the water capacity fee. That's why they've been utilizing that program. So I think the concept a month ago was, is this something we could include, and would that sweeten the pot further, make it more attractive to a property owner who happens to have a virtual meter agreement or a we'll call it a zero use meter. In other words, assigned to another meter, but actually not using the water. So again, into this, I went back and just said, okay, what were the monthly fees from January 1st through now? And it adds up to $1,173. So, and this will keep growing, right? Because $28, $30 a month as time goes on, it'll keep going up, $400 a year or something, $360 a year.
So I'm gonna play devil's advocate on this one, because I kind of feel like in some ways you can look at somebody holding on to a water unit just for the sake of holding it onto it. Meanwhile, the district is still incurring that infrastructure cost. And I'm not sure that I'm willing to say, oh, you now get retroactively repaid, because in some ways, did they harm the district by holding that water unit that could have gone to somebody else where the district would have been providing the service and would have received this money? So that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, that was my question. I mean, and I think you mentioned that before. This money that we were collecting, it wasn't for use of water. I thought it was for the infrastructure that we.
Yeah,
had
it's
to-
the base rate
Yeah,
cost, right?
so that's infrastructure. So that to me means that everyone needed to put this money in for the infrastructure, whether they're using water or not. And of course, many of the property owners were not paying this fee for many, many years. So this is relatively something new. So, I mean, I wanna make sure we give as much incentive to do this relinquishment program, but I just do have a concern, because I think this money was just for the infrastructure piece of it, and I think and it was something that should be it would be, I mean, if we return that money, I don't think it'd be fair to others who've paid into this.
Well, it's gonna grow.
Sorry?
It'll grow.
So I just, so
Over
you're
time.
holding on to it, yeah.
I think the issue came up because there was interest in making this as attractive to the property owners as possible without, subjecting ourselves to some legal risk. And this was one way this is another tool that you have at your disposal. It's purely a policy call. You have the option included or not. The money came about because of ordinance 2014 when we required people to connect for the very reason, right? So I think it's something that you could include. And keep in mind, just because let's say you're on the fence and maybe it's included in the ordinance, you could 5 years from now go back and say, you know what, this is getting out of hand. Now we're refunding people, more than we think is fair, 10 years worth or something like, or you could even put a maximum.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can we cap it?
Yeah, sure, you can cap it, right? So this is a policy call. We've resolved we think we don't have a legal issue. So you could say, up to 5 years worth of payments or something.
But if the carrot is to relinquish,
Right away.
then we've taken away the carrot. Because now we're saying, don't worry, everything you've been paying monthly, you're gonna get back. Well,
Only if you relinquish.
if you relinquish, but if we're looking at somebody who perhaps says, I'm not gonna develop, I'm not gonna use these water units, but now I'm having to continue to pay monthly. If I wanna stop that, then that's the incentive to relinquish.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So anyway,
I just see it, I'm sorry, Director English.
Director English,
No, I'm actually in favor of including this because I think that one, we're gonna get, that cost back on the resale and then some. you know, even though I have argued, I've used the argument on this, on that, sale that, or the cost for the water meter, the virtual meter, as exactly what Director Fardenosh was saying, that there's a real cost there. For us to hold that water for you, there's a cost for us. So it kind of goes against my argument a little bit, but I think the value of the incentive is outweighs that, so.
But if we have, so say there's somebody, if they could see, well, they could just hold on to this water unit. I mean, if they're on the fence in terms of relinquishing or not right now, if they see, well, if they could hold on and they even be reimbursed more money later on, then that will take that incentive away. So I mean, if we're trying to
They're being
have,
Reimburse their own.
that they're paying
Yeah,
out.
yeah,
So that, you know what I'm saying? So they're
Well-
paying $28 a month,
yes,
and then 5 years down the road, getting that $28 back. But it's worth a lot less 5 years down the road, so
but
that doesn't
I
quite
mean-
make sense. Because you're paying, you pay out, let's say $1,000, how much, $300 and some dollars a year it comes to. But and then you get it back in 5 years, but it's worth way less.
well, I mean, to me, yeah, I mean, I just think we're taking the skin out of the game for them. I mean, I just think if we, yeah. I was
So
just
you're
not-
opposed to what's being proposed here?
Yeah, and the way it's
I don't-
stated.
I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I think if you look at the whole picture, this is such a minor, small part that it's not gonna make any difference at all. And so, I mean, I am in favor of,
Now, but in a few
Yeah.
years, it could
well,
grow.
but in a few years, we can change it. It's a policy.
Yeah.
And it just started. So I'm
In
in
favor.
favor of
So-
doing this.
Okay, so we've got 2 opposed, 2 in favor. Director Giardini.
Well, I had a couple of questions that I seem to have forgotten.
Well, while you're thinking of that,
No.
I'm gonna ask a question. With this, are we talking about also applying the local agency investment fund interest?
Yes, this will be on top.
So it
of-
would be on top of that. So in addition, it would be the interest as well. So it's not
No,
just,
well, I hadn't contemplated interest.
well, I think we need to provide direction on that, to say, doesn't it provide the interest as well?
Well, the interest, so we have the initial unit cost.
Yeah.
Interest at Leif rate based on that initial unit cost until the date of relinquishment. That's the prior bullet point. And then we have the monthly fees. It would get more complicated to have to try to figure out what was the interest on a monthly fee. I mean, it can be done.
Well,
I don't-
I'm not proposing that. I'm just saying that we need to make a decision on that, to say, because we talked about the cost. On the other page, we talked about the cost of the unit. We're providing the interest. So since this is really going across a period of time, would it be interest as well, or just the actual cost?
That seems a little staff time intensive for, you know, limited gain for the participants.
So we're gonna say just to
I think it's a
clarify
pure
this.
policy call for you. We could add the interest. I don't think it's gonna move the needle a lot. I mean, you know, and I think there are some ways to limit this. If you're worried about this becoming like in 20 years, this might get out of hand or something. You could put a cap on the amount, you know, to maximum $3,000 or whatever. We have some tools available if that's a concern for you. I think you have to look at this purely as a way to, it's just a way to improve the incentive.
Understood.
And you have a lot of discretion.
I just want to make that clear in terms of what we're actually preventing. So we've got 2 that are supporting staff recommendation. This would be with no interest, just the actual cost. So Director Giardini, you had a question?
I guess it was a comment actually in that I don't see the $28 a month that we're collecting from people as a infrastructure cost. When we didn't do anything to we didn't provide them with any infrastructure. In fact, if they hook up, they have to put in their own private line and everything. Now, yes, we've been holding on to this water, but where is it? It's in the ground. We do have staff time connected with having to build this, keep track of it, set it in our water meters. So that was just a comment I had. Back to whether or not I agree to this, I think I'm with Director Fardnish and with Director Peterson. I have to look at people's names, and Director English. In that, I think that if you're trying to provide a carrot and get people to take advantage of this, it didn't work last time. And so we're gaining a lot. I mean, our meters are now selling for $41,000.
Yeah.
We're gaining a lot. And even if you're like going, okay, we're losing this $1,173. Don't forget, we're getting that monthly fee and we're getting the late interest on top of it. So we actually make out in the long
So
run.
you're in
by a
support of
few
this, if they're
couple dollars.
relinquishing the units to relinquish the fee paid monthly for that virtual meter.
Right, but I wanted to finish my comment.
Okay.
Which was that we're still getting the late interest on top of it. So we're still making money in the long run anyway, even if we refund this. So I would support it without with the 1,100, the fees that they've paid back to them, but without interest on it, such as Peterson and English said.
Okay, so I think we have a majority opinion on this. So staff has direction to put this into the policy to include the virtual water meter fee, but no interest calculation. Any comments from the public on this particular item? And if so, please unmute your phone. Okay, I don't see any members of the public wishing to comment at this time, so I'll bring it back to the board and we'll move to the next
Well,
bullet
I have
point.
a comment. Is there,
I was telling you to
Okay.
speak up.
is there interest in putting a cap on this amount on the board or? You know, as
I think,
general manager said $3,000 or something, because I was looking at the numbers, you know. So somebody that purchased them 24,000. So with the interest that we're getting is 26,500. So I mean, if say it's, you know, if we cap it at another 3,000, they could be getting back $29,000, $30,000. So I know, I mean. So I'm just, yeah. just
I
thinking.
personally would like to see how it rolls out over the next 3 or 4 years, but as a policy, we can change it in that time. And if it looks like it's getting out of hand, we can stop it right then and there. I think it probably would put a lot of staff time into the accounting if we, I don't know, had to figure out a cap every month or whatever. So, I mean, that's kind of what I feel about it.
Yeah, it's really, this is from a accounting standpoint, this will be like a whole different transaction because the capital fees go into one account. These monthly fees are going into our O and M. So we'd actually be like refunding
Also, it's
water.
operation.
the operating.
Oh, yeah, the operating fee.
Operation. I'm definitely against it.
Okay, so it doesn't seem like there's any appetite to cap this at this time.
Yeah, again, just to make, and I want to make this clear, I guess I can try to set this up so it's more fluid, but this will end up being if we get to the bottom of this and we end up with a consensus about how we want to move forward, we'll come back with an ordinance. Most of these items are going to be contained in the code, and to change them would require an ordinance. It's a little bit, it's not to say you couldn't change it down the road, but it's not quite like tomorrow. We'd have to introduce and approve an ordinance, but I might be able to develop this so that it's, if funds are available or funds are budgeted or something that gives you a little more leniency. You certainly could do so on the first, because it's going to be dependent on having a budget line item available.
So I have one more question. So if this is coming from operations, and I don't know how many we're gonna give out. I mean, is this gonna affect people's water rates?
Well, I mean, I suppose I couldn't say that there's no way that it will. The district will, right now, you have this unit, right, this water unit that's paying monthly fees. And so it's part of the global system. and so if that goes away, then yes, somebody could argue that it will affect everybody else's rates by that 1/3000th of a base rate. However, the anticipation is that it gets reissued and then 5 years later it gets put back on the same system once the payment plan is recovered. So it's sort of maybe temporarily does.
No.
What I will say though is when you adopted the water rates back in 2018, we had to estimate, we didn't have they weren't required to be connected yet. So we had to estimate how many people were gonna sign up for virtual meters, and we didn't want to overestimate. That was a lot of risk. So we assumed like 2/3 of folks would not, but we were wrong. It was really like 80% did. And so we have more people connected via virtual meter agreements than our rate structure anticipated. So we're bringing in more money than we thought we would right now.
So I'm gonna recommend that, we have the water buffer model that the board looks at annually. And maybe perhaps that's an opportunity to also look at, the relinquishment program and, how's that doing? And, have a report out at that time. Does that sound fair?
I don't understand.
So if we're looking at, we've got concerns about, well, this particular item for the virtual meters is coming out of the operating budget versus the other item is coming out of the capital budget. When we do the water buffer model, when we look at that annually, we're looking at water units. We're looking at how many do we have on the wait list? How many can we relinquish? It's an opportunity to look at, where are we at with, is this relinquishment policy or program? Is it something that we want to alter in some ways? Because you're right, when we did do the new water rates in 2018, we made a lot of assumptions. And even with this relinquishment program, we offered it in 2017 for the first time. Or 18 and for the first time, and there wasn't a whole lot of interest. There was some, but not a whole lot. And now, since time has passed, it's like, well, let's offer this again to see if there's any interest, because there has been some individuals who have come forward to say, I may be interested in relinquishing their water units. So I think it's just an opportunity to put it on a dashboard and to revisit it at that time, and to have staff provide an update on how many have been relinquished. Is there any issues with the operating budget as a result of this particular item
Yeah.
in terms of reimbursement?
I guess I look at it and say, if we're gonna budget for it, then we would do so as a part of the budget, and then I would keep you if there was a need to amend that budget, you would. Let's say this is more successful than you like, then you have a choice of whether you want to amend the budget to make more funds available. Quite honestly, I don't think this is gonna,
No. it's not-
I don't wanna, I think this will generate some interest. I don't think it's gonna be explosive.
Okay, let's move on to the next one.
Okay, so to discuss whether or not the program, this incentivized relinquishment, should be temporarily offered as it was previously, or permanent, essentially replacing the existing program. And that's something that that we hadn't talked about before. I think what 2014 showed us was that, not everybody's on the edge of their seats waiting to see what policy changes TCSD is gonna make. For the most part, they might get these folks might get a letter from us, they pay some attention, not a lot. And I think if the goal is to, over a longer period of time, make relinquishments available, perhaps changing it permanently or viewing it as a permanent change. Again, you can change it again down the road if you need to, or you can control your expenses through the budget. In other words, if you don't budget any money for buying back these relinquishments, then it isn't available. It's only if the district has the funds appropriately.
Questions? Comments? Okay. Any questions from members of the public? And if so, unmute your phone. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any questions from the public, so Director English is in support of this on a permanent basis. Director Peterson, permanent. Director Fardanish,
It's fine.
okay, Director Giardini.
Permanent, but I think with your idea of bringing it back once a year.
Oh,
to
yeah, I
just
mean,
do-
this is just giving direction for staff to draft something. And even if we say permanent, the board can change its policy at a future date.
And we should review it periodically anyway.
Yeah,
so,
Absolutely.
No, I liked your idea of reviewing it and that seemed to have gotten dropped.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Okay, so I think we want permanent on this one. I think we have consensus there.
Okay. The next comment is confirm that the units should be re-released at the time of relinquishment as opposed to waiting for the next water buffer update results to be available before determining if a release of unit is warranted. And so I guess I wanted just to confirm that the idea is still to relinquish and reissue, not hold and wait until the next year. And I could talk you through a couple of things. Now, one, generally speaking, we're already accounting for these units, right? We're already reserving the water. So relinquishment and reissuance isn't going to create a new liability with a couple of exceptions. And that is because our water units, they would be released as a current water unit valued at 575 gallons a day today. The relinquished unit might be 300 gallons, or it might be 430, or it might be 575. If it's a 575, it's a wash. There's no impact to the buffer. If it's a smaller water unit, they'll have some nominal impact. Again, I think you can control this by, but with a budget line item, you may not want to have $3 million in there year one, because that might create a deficit if we really had that many relinquishments. But I think this is a manageable issue. I'm not viewing dozens and dozens of relinquished units coming in every year. I think maybe we make this available, maybe a couple properties look at it. Maybe those that they inquire about it in the future are more apt to follow through because it's a little bit better return than it was previously. But it's not not an explosive. I don't view it as something that's going to really
I don't think people are gonna be
that.
banging down our doors. So, questions from any board members on this particular one? Thoughts? Are we in favor of what's being recommended by staff here? Okay, it looks like from the nods of the heads, we have all board members in agreement on this one. Any members of the public have questions on this particular one? And even if you have questions about our water buffer model, and just to give some background, that's just something that the district has modeled out, how many water units are in use and how many are outstanding, so that we can make sure that the district can continue to provide water for not only existing customers, but for those individuals that have a will serve letter. So that's what the water buffer model is. So it's something that the board reviews on an annual basis. I'm in agreement with this one too. So it looks like we've got consensus by all board members. So
Okay.
let's move on to the next one.
And these are kind of more minor issues, but just wanted confirmation since we're going through spending all this time on this. That a riparian agency agreement, those units cannot be relinquished. And the reason is we cannot transfer that to another parcel.
Yeah.
It's parcel specific. So,
Good question.
yes, ma'am.
When somebody proves out riparian rights, and let's say they have 15 units or something, and they do a I'm thinking, I'm not involved with the one, but the one on Old County Road, didn't they subdivide those parcels up there, Old County and Topless Creek? And they don't use all their riparian rights.
It's common, so it's common to have more riparian water than is needed for the project. The issue we run into is when a property owner buys units early, typically to avoid like a fee increase. And they ultimately don't end up needing all of those. So we do have a number of riparian parcels that have prepaid units, outstanding units beyond, that are paid for. Some of which may never go to use. If let's say they bought 20
So how are
units.
those different, our other units? I mean, riparian rights stay with the land.
Yes,
And I understand that. So they've purchased too much water, such as some of the other developers out there that have developed, who have purchased too much water. So I'm just asking.
yeah,
I
so we
don't
cannot
understand.
we cannot reissue that unit to another parcel.
Right.
So
Oh,
it
I
would just
see.
be like a
That's the
pure
difference.
refund issue as opposed to a releasing it.
Release, okay,
And keep in mind that the riparian agency agreement identifies the amount of water that's available. They don't have to use it all, right? I mean, that's
Right.
sort of like just
okay.
so, yeah, it's not, it cannot be assigned. The district can't take that back and then resell it. Because it was only for that particular parcel.
Can they turn in their, I mean, can they
Refund it, like get a refund?
not get a refund? So let's say you determine that 50 riparian units are available on this land. Can they say then they only want to use 4? And
Yes.
does other 47 remain viable or not?
Yeah, but they're just still attached to that parcel. They could later on intensify their
Oh, okay.
development. Because it's part of it's attached to that parcel,
Okay,
whether they're paid for or not.
okay, got it. Thank you.
It's, this would not be, or the previous program was not available for properties with a final recorded subdivision map or final county approved developments unless the units are in excess of those required for development. So the concept here was, we didn't want a project that had a ready to build that now gave up property and now you had land that was undevelopable, for which we had previously issued an intent to serve or will serve letter.
I just got not available for properties with final recorded subdivision maps. Okay, I'm good with that. Or final county approved developments. What if the development falls apart? Then, so if you've got a permit in for, okay, let's say, I mean, I had a hotel down in, or Hamish Marshall had a hotel down in San Luis Obispo City up, right? The 2008, recession hit. He ended up not building. Okay, so let's say that was here in Templeton, then, and if he had paid for water meters and didn't use them, wouldn't it be the same as everybody else? I mean, until those,
It's a good,
until it's built or until it's recorded, they should be able to get a refund.
okay, so the term final recorded subdivision map
Is
works
good.
because that means there's a lot. for
Right,
every house.
right.
What is the term? Because I think that we're probably on the same page with what we're trying to do. We don't want to take a project, or we don't want to
Because you've got it entitled according to this, but it's not built yet.
how is does that entitlement, it expires at some point, right?
Right. Right.
How about, could I call it an unexpired approved? Like, we're talking about like a conditional use permit is issued. You only
Right,
have
so
so long.
Right, because whether it's a map or if it's a minor use permit or CUP, they've all got time limits on them. And once those time limits expire, then if they haven't used it, the development goes away. So unexpired would be a good word. Okay. And unless the units are in excess of those required, and I'm okay with that too. Okay.
Okay.
Is Director English okay? I mean, you're in development too. Do you, I mean, you agree with that?
I do. I would hate for us to put any artificial restrictions on this where it prohibits somebody who needed to relinquish.
Yeah, and I think they could always go back and say, we're now abandoning our project, please invalidate our permit. I don't know how that would work, but I don't see that
That's it,
happening,
yeah.
because again, they're, even if they didn't want to develop it, they'd be trying to sell the property with those entitlements. So really what we're trying to do is not invalidate an approval, because the approval is based on the district's commitment to serve that project. So if the county still was basing the approval on the district's will serve commitment, we wouldn't want to all of a sudden make that impossible. But it would be, it'd be up to the property owner about how they want to deal with that particular circumstance. If they had like an approved project.
The language is proposed works for me.
There will be some projects that are, let's say they're in the planning process. We'd have to make some sort of determinations as to whether we could kind of retract the will serve with letter. Again, the county will only take an application from a developer so far unless the district issues an intent to serve or will serve commitment for that project. And we have a lot of those that are kind of outstanding, right? I mean, people get them and then their project doesn't happen for whatever reason. So there could be, I guess, I think there's just there'll be some projects or some properties that there'll have to be some determination made as to whether or not it's eligible. And obviously they could come to the, let's say the district staff determined they weren't eligible, they wanted to be, they could always come to you, if they could appeal that determination, and, you know, we could work through those details. And they would not be available if the relinquishment would cause a legal parcel to have no water on it at all.
I have a question about that. So if I do a subdivision map, yes, every parcel has to have a water. If you look at the old maps that created the town of Templeton, and there's water associated with a property, and I think Cambria does this. In fact, I know Cambria does this. You can take a lot and take the water away, and that's okay legally. I think the Subdivision Map Act only reads, I can't create a parcel if it doesn't have water to it. But once that parcel is created, that person could voluntarily give that water right up. And the only reason I'm asking this is because if somebody owns a single family lot out there and doesn't ever want to build on it, or a commercial lot, and they have 1 or 2 meters and doesn't ever want to build on it, and they're allowed to relinquish it, we get that water meter in that would go to somebody that would do a development. We would get CFD funds on it and all our other funds on it. And so I think as long as we're not violating the Subdivision Map Act, I don't know why we have to have this restriction.
Yeah, I
That
don't
might
think
be
you
a
have to. This is just what the 2014 program had.
What we currently have.
Well, in 2014, when that 1-year program that included this requirement, I think the concept was, let's not create an unbuildable lot. But I think your point is valid that there are plenty of parcels in Templeton that don't have water on them now.
Mhm.
So.
And if there were somebody who lived in Ohio who said, I'm never gonna build there because I don't want to live in earthquake country, such as what some of my old relatives used to say, that they may want to give it up and then we could benefit from it in that way. As long as we're not violating the Subdivision Map Act, I would say we could let a parcel know, we could have a parcel without having water to it.
So is any board member opposed to that item, removing the last bullet?
No, I actually had in my notes to pull that out. It was, I don't think it's ever gonna happen, but
Yeah.
you know, why put a restriction in prevent somebody who wants to relinquish their water?
Yeah, I guess the only thing, and again, we're getting really into the weeds and maybe something that's probably not gonna happen, is virtually all the lots that are here now were formed by a subdivision map that got recorded. So like we talked about earlier, this program is not available for properties that have a final recorded subdivision map. I guess the distinguishment is, at some point in time, the conditions that require, you know, we have a final subdivision, you expect a house to be built on every lot eventually. And under this lot might have been created by a parcel map or subdivision map 40, 50 years ago. It was created somehow, some sort of similar technique. So I think the idea of the earlier bullet was, okay, we don't want a project that was recently approved that just got recorded a year or two ago or whatever, that still has a lot of development potential to become an abandoned project, and we don't want to be a part of that. However, under this scenario, this lot's been around for 40 years or 50 years, and the property owner does not want to use that water unit. I don't think the circumstances are I don't think they're gonna come up very often.
Because that would really decrease the value of the property, right?
Yeah, the property would be worthless, but I think it's a legal parcel, it's an undeveloped parcel is really what we're talking about here.
I mean,
Because if
you're saying it has no entitlements.
It has no entitlements, it's,
No, no.
well, or it's undeveloped. It may have the water units, but it's, you know, they have no intentions of developing it, so they'll relinquish.
I'm not, so if you have a parcel and it has a water meter on it, your entitlement is you can legally build on it whatever is allowed. What, you know, but what my point is that if you have that water there and you have no intention ever to build on it, which is gonna be really rare, let's talk about this.
So it's undeveloped, it's undeveloped.
It's right, it's undeveloped. Why not allow them?
I agree, I agree.
Yeah,
But that's what I'm saying, it's not just a legal parcel, because it's an it's an undeveloped parcel. It's not just legal, it's an undeveloped one. Because you wouldn't wait for a legal parcel that's already been developed to have somebody say, well, I want to relinquish my water units. I'm gonna go to a well, you know?
they can't do that within the.
I
CSD.
agree, they can't do that.
Yeah, it probably doesn't matter. I mean, just, I don't, we can strike it from the rules. I don't think it's gonna apply. I would make sure that if someone says, I wanna lose their units, say, why don't you just sell the property instead? Because this is
Yeah.
not
So
wise, but that's their call. Right?
Okay, so in the interest of time, I think we're all in agreement to remove this, yes? Director Fardanish, are you okay with removing that?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm just thinking, going back to developed and undeveloped. So can somebody relinquish their water if there's a house already on there and go to a well?
No.
No, they can only relinquish water in excess of what they need.
Yeah.
So like if it was like if they had, let's say they had a parcel with 2 water units, because remember back in the day, they would before the ADU laws changed, they had to require a second water meter to ever have like a mother-in-law unit.
Yeah.
So that actually a lot of our wait list are people, not a lot, but a
So,
lot of the properties on the wait list are those kind of circumstances where they really don't need them anymore because of the ADU rules that exist today.
okay, so on this bullet point, then we have the first 3 that the board has agreed with. The last one, the board is asking that that be stricken.
Yep.
Any comments from members of the public? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the last one.
And this is maybe gets into a new area. Most of the folks, or many of the folks that have unconnected water units also have unconnected sewer units. These have really not been a subject of much discussion because there's no cost associated with maintaining those right now. The district hasn't required them to virtually connect those. And some folks do attempt to relinquish the sewer units today. They're not as, it takes a lot longer because there's not a pent up demand for sewer like there is water. But our issue at the staff level was, should we, in order to sweeten this deal better, should we also, because again, remember the sewer relinquishment is the same process as the water mirrored. Where if you, let's say that same Jane Doe owns a parcel with 2 water units and 2 sewer units, and she wants to relinquish a 1 water unit, 1 sewer unit. We have this incentivized water unit relinquishment program where we can write her a check and 2 weeks later she gets paid for it. But if she, for the sewer unit, under the current rules, she'd have to pay $500 and then she'd have to wait because we have to wait for someone to pick that, to buy a sewer unit. They're typically only bought when somebody already has a water unit but doesn't have a sewer unit and they're ready to pull the permit. Then it's obtained. So one of the concepts was, and keep in mind the sewer fund, the capital fund is much more restricted. Really, we barely have any money, so we really couldn't put $1 million into the sewer fund to buy back units. But one option could be the sewer units get relinquished with the water units if they're on the same parcels at the same time. And they also not be subject to the $500 processing fee. So at least you'd eliminate the $500 processing fee cost. That might be a way of improving the program. There'd be really no reason for that property owner to want to keep the second sewer unit if they gave up the second water unit.
So did they paid for the sewer? unit,
Yes.
And so that money would not be refunded.
No, it would be upon relinquishment.
If it's done at the same time as water?
Well, they can do it independently.
Okay.
You know, but under this scenario where we wouldn't charge the administrative fee.
But do they get paid at the time?
So no, in this case,
They would,
we're not really capable of front loading this like we are the water units. We don't have the cash, so they'd have to wait on the sewer unit, but we could eliminate the $500 processing fee.
Oh, I see. So you're saying, just so I have it straight in my head, you're saying that if you're gonna relinquish the sewer, we'll eliminate the $500 fee, but we won't pay you back your cost plus the lave interest until somebody else buys it.
Or not even include the lave interest or I think you have some tools.
Because you have the lave interest on, I just said that because we have the lave interest on the water units.
So keep in mind, the district has accumulated a balance of the water fund and the capital fund. We really don't have that in the sewer fund. We've spent the money as it comes in on expanding the wastewater plants and other things. So there isn't the cash that's earning interest in the bank. There's been, you know, many years where that balance was down very close to zero. So the district doesn't have a means of front loading it. I mean, I suppose we could talk about whether or not this program wasn't intended to generate turnover on wastewater, right? That wasn't viewed as a desire necessarily. We weren't trying to generate new sewer connections. But we looked at this situation and said, well, many of these property owners we want to encourage them to relinquish the water unit. How do we deal with the sewer unit that's likely also there? So if we can remove some hurdles, maybe it improves the process. Remove the $500 fee if it's part of the same transaction. I think they'd still have to wait till the unit they still have to follow the relinquishment process, but we could get rid of the $500. Or you could do something better. You could budget $50,000 or some modest amount. But it's gonna be very small. I mean, like right now, well, I have it right here. Just by way of example, the water fund has $3.2 million in capital. The sewer fund is $328,000. It's got 10% to work with. So we wouldn't want to tie up. I mean, I wouldn't want to tie up a lot of that money because again, we're unlikely to be reselling those immediately.
So what would happen is that if Deborah and Wayne and Jeff came in and they all wanted to relinquish their sewer rights, if Deborah came in first, she would be top of the list to get. If Pam came in and bought
Yes.
one, it would go to her, and then if
Yes.
Naveed came in, it would go to Wayne next. So there would be kind of
The
a
pecking order.
reimbursement list.
Yeah, that's how we do it today. Again, we've had, so let me give you an example. You asked if, on Lost Tobless, that same area by Lost Tobless and Old County. There was a circumstance where one of those properties had more sewer units than they needed. So they relinquished the excess sewer units. They just had to wait for those to cycle through.
Hmm.
What we're suggesting here is that's gonna happen. If we don't make any changes to the sewer code, that's what will happen. We'll have the incentivized water relinquishment and then the sewer will be the way it is today, where they pay the $500 and they wait. You could waive the $500 if it's part of the same transaction. That might sweeten the deal. You could front load a few of these, but not nearly to the extent that you can on the water side. It's not, we don't have the flexibility with the sewer fund because we don't have a lot of cash in the capital account.
So with that being the case, I think then we really have to wait until that sewer unit is resold to be able to provide that reimbursement. Because
Yeah.
I'm hearing we don't have the funds, so I think that's the only option that we have. Then the question becomes is, do we waive the $500 processing fee? And it seems if they're doing it at the same time they're relinquishing the water, that could be an additional incentive. But the $500 is really to cover our administrative costs of processing that, correct?
Yeah, it's, because
So-
now we've got to.
Yeah,
make the
I would
unit
say to
available.
sweeten the deal is if it's done at the same time as the water units, I would be in favor of waiving it. So
Sounds good.
is everybody in agreement with that? Okay. So it looks like we've got an agreement there, to wait until we have the funds available and really, waive the $500 if it's done at the same time as the water unit.
It's part of the same sort of transaction.
Correct. So, any questions from members of the public on this? Okay, seeing none.
Oh, I do have a question.
Let me- I know. Okay, so with that, I think we've got direction to staff on what to do with this particular policy regarding the water sewer unit relinquishment. We'll move to our next agenda item, which is recommendations to the Board of Supervisors for filling the vacancy. And this is to discuss what recommendations will be given. We have 2 open seats. It is a 4-year term. And we have 1 incumbent who will be appointed. And we have 1 incumbent who is not running for reelection. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our general manager, who's had some communication with the county. And I think there was also a letter that the county sent to our general manager, which he has provided, I think, a copy to all board members.
Yeah, so I think you outlined this well. The election nomination period for the November election has come and gone. There's no longer an opportunity for a member of the public to put their name in the hat and run for the November election. There was, Wayne Peterson did submit and he is scheduled to be confirmed for that seat and will serve a 4-year term. The Board of Supervisors under the Elections Code has the authority to fill any terms that for which there is not a candidate. So there was this open nomination period. There is not a candidate. So the Board of Supervisors has the authority. They will, or they're capable of filling, I guess I say they will, with whom, but they will fill, they're able to fill that term. It will be a full 4-year term by the Board of Supervisors. I had inquired with the county clerk's office. This is the first time I've ran into this situation, certainly here, although it does happen. And the county clerk's office has advised us that we may make a recommendation, or the district may make a recommendation or recommendations to the county Board of Supervisors. Now, to what extent they follow a recommendation that you may or may not make, I don't know. But I think it is an opportunity for you to have some influence on who joins you on the board. If you do nothing, you'll have very little influence, I suppose, and it'll be the luck of the draw. But I think there is an opportunity for us, the district, to make this issue more known to the public, and maybe even to make a specific recommendation of who shall serve. Now, nobody's beating down on the doors to join you.
We do have some interest in the public attending via Zoom this evening. So there are, I'm hopeful that there will be some people who perhaps will have an interest. But it's my understanding that if it should come down to the Board of Supervisor appointing this individual to the board, that they would still have to live within the TCSD district boundaries.
Yes, they have to be eligible to be on the board. So they have to be a registered voter over 18 years of age and live within the boundaries. It's actually not all that hard to become qualified.
Is there a time-
Probably the wrong audience for me to make that comment to, but because it's certainly a challenging position. Now, so I think there's 2 questions before you. One, do you want to consider do you want to make a recommendation or have some involvement in this process? And if your answer is yes, then how do we go about doing that? I think that that's probably the more in-depth.
Is there a time limit we have?
Yes,
Yeah.
the county clerk's office has said, if we're gonna make a recommendation, we need to notify their office by October 7th of that recommendation. So I had assumed that this wouldn't be, the district recommends, Jane Doe, we would actually have had a process and why. So that when the county, so I'm assuming this, our letter, mine or whomever's, would actually eventually make its way to the board of supervisors and they would have some reason for supporting the recommendation. We'd outline the process that we followed to come up with that recommendation.
So I did post something on Templeton Crowd, and about tonight's meeting and, also about this position being, available. I've also indicated that if individuals who were interested were not able to attend tonight's meeting, that they would follow up with you for additional information. Because there may be some people who say, well, I'm not quite sure, what does this involve? What's my time commitment? And so I'm hoping that if there's someone interested, that they would also come forward. But it's trying to get the word out in the community to serve in this role. I mean, it's an important function. So I know we have individuals on the call this evening. I don't know if those members of the public who had called in this evening are calling in because of this particular agenda topic. And I would offer up that if you have questions, you may ask them now. If you're not comfortable with asking them in this forum, I would also suggest that you follow up with their general manager, Jeff Briltz, who will provide you with ample information about what the role is. So I'll open it up. If you have a question that you would like to ask of the general manager or any board members at this time. Okay. Seeing that there's no questions from the board or from the public, hopefully they'll be comfortable contacting you directly. Do you want to provide your phone number?
Yes, 805-434-4900. This is the main office number here.
Yeah.
So I had,
Yeah, Director Giardini, you have a question or
There is a
comment?
question about the process does just the supervisor of our district decide, or is it all 5 of them?
no, it has to be the board of supervisors.
Supervisors,
So it's not an appointment by just John Bashan, like say to the planning commission or something. It's a appointment by the board of supervisors would have to make that decision. Now, that's not to say that they couldn't lean on John Bashan heavily or ask for his recommendation since this is in his area.
Do they interview each person, or do you know the
I
process?
don't know. This is the information that I got. I actually kind of wanted to wait until, I thought it would be if we, or if you, the board of directors, wanted to have a role in this, it made sense for us to do as robust of a process as you want to do. That way you can have a recommendation that carries some weight with it. But if you'd rather take more of a hands-off approach and say, well, we'll see what they come up with, I think that's an option as well. I don't know what happens if there's nobody interested. I mean, there's nobody interested right now. We need to generate interest. Nobody put their name in the hat during the normal time. So I had suggested if you want to have if you want to make a recommendation, I thought we need to get kind of a heavy word out, ask people to submit letters, to make it known to you somehow, some way that they're interested. And then at your first meeting in October, you could, let's say there were multiple people interested, you could meet with them, you could ask them to talk about themselves if they were willing. I don't see this based on the circumstances we're facing right now. I don't think you're gonna have 10 to choose from, or it's actually not your choice, but not gonna have probably the goal is to generate interest that way you would have some opportunity to provide some direct input. And then the board would make a recommendation to the county that A, B, or A or B, or A, B, and C should be appointed. You know, you wouldn't necessarily, because we don't know who these folks are, you may not, it may be kind of hypothetical to figure out who and how you would actually recommend, but I think the real work is making this known and seeing if there's somebody out there that would be willing to serve and getting them a little bit up to speed before we get too far down the road.
I think it's an opportunity for us to get the word out, and hopefully it would drive more interest in this meeting. I think that we tend to have public present in our meeting if there's a problem, or if there's a threat of reducing our park and recreations budget. And that seems to be when we get people attending. And I know Director English and Director Giardini a few years back had done a little analysis and study to say, how can we get more people interested in attending the meeting? And, you know, our seats are still empty. So that's the way to really kind of get people engaged, so that we have at least a pool of people who are interested in filtering through and serving on this board. So I think it would be an opportunity for us to have some influence by having some names and some bios provided to the Board of Supervisors, and at least a recommendation from this board. But the question becomes is, how do we get more interest? But there's a time also for not just getting people interested, but getting them to get an idea of what the role is. So I don't know if it's just, you know, putting up a stand in, you know, the park on Farmers Market to try
Yeah, I
to
mean, I
solicit.
think there's two issues. You have this current one that has kind of a pretty firm deadline that's coming up fast, which is, do you want to make a recommendation? How do we go about doing that? I think of the larger issue of how do we avoid this in the future by having more people engaged with the district on an ongoing basis, so that there's a greater likelihood that future people will run when opening.
The second one I see is more long-term. I think right now it's really, we're up against an October 7th date. And if we don't have a recommendation by the October 7th date, then John Prashant is likely going to just, I don't know, pick somebody that he knows here that lives in the district, is what I would think. Yes, Director Giardini?
I think the two issues are, one, getting the word out to the public that we need people to apply for this position, right? That's the first one. The second one on whether or not we want to make a recommendation. I agree with everything that was in the staff report about the press release and Instagram on the website of the Parks and Rec. You know, those were all good. Templeton Proud, I thought of the same thing, so I'm glad you already did that, because I think a lot of people did that. Maybe is the chamber got a meeting coming up that we could announce it there? I haven't been keeping track of them.
Well, part of the problem with the chamber is because the chamber, Templeton Chamber, has been merged with Paso.
Paso, right,
So we're
but
now the
still.
stepchild.
Right, but people from Templeton attend the chamber meeting, so what medias can we use to get?
Yeah, I think we can use the
Maximum-
chambers newsletter system still,
Right.
their constant contact kind of system. I was envisioning that we'd come up with if the board wanted to do the recommendation, we'd come up with a, you know, kind of an article that could be published through various sources, like right away, next few days.
Right.
And would ask people then to either come at your first meeting in October, or preferably, or write a letter of interest, so that, again, we knew there was something out there, and then at that time, you could say 2 people have put their name in, and for these various reasons, we're recommending one, or we're recommending both, or we make no recommendation. You're not obligated to make a recommendation, it's an
No.
opportunity.
So that's onto my second issue is if 2 people show up and we make a recommendation of one or the other, and the other one, and we make a recommendation for A and B gets chosen because it's out of our hands, then B's not gonna like us a whole lot. And so I don't know. I don't know if it's our job to make a recommendation, or I don't know if I feel comfortable doing that. Because I understand that we are a cohesive group that needs to work together, and we need to look for people who can work together, will be part of the team. But at the same time, you know, if 4 or 5 people show up and we recommend C and John Pashang chooses A, that doesn't look so good.
So
So
let
I
me-
think the fear.
Let me ask this, does any board member know of anyone who would be interested? Let's start with that.
I might.
Okay.
He's been real active in Park and Recs. He's been, I don't know, like Dale Wiggins, do you know him? He's been really active as a coach for years and years, and I think on the soccer,
Yeah.
I just know he's, and what's funny is I just saw him at Farm Supply, but I didn't talk to him. And then it was one of those incidents where you walk out, you get in your car and you go, oh, that's who that was. And I thought, oh, he would be a good guy, but I have not approached him or anything.
Okay.
Uh,
You have a comment?
Yeah, I have a comment. Not the comment, don't ever get old.
Did we wake you up?
Yes,
Okay.
you scared 2 people away though.
Oh, I tend to do that.
Okay. Do we make the decision and do we go into closed session to make that decision? We can't, it's a personnel matter.
You cannot, I can't think of a way, I can continue to look at it. One, it's not a decision you're making, it's not your appointment to make, I think.
We're just making recommendations.
Yeah, even if you were to fill, so let's say let's say one of you were to move in February. And the board could then refill the remainder of that term. Even then, you'd have to make the decision in public.
Okay. I mean, I think we should be involved, I'm not. I mean, as far as hurting people's feelings, I don't. You know.
You
if
heard
that-
mine all the time.
I know, but I mean, and I mean to, but I don't see that as our problem. I mean, if we want A and they select B and B, what are they gonna do? I mean, you know, they wanna be on the board. And just because we pick somebody else, I mean, it's just like running.
Well,
Okay, I mean, the first time I ran, I lost, so the second time I ran, I won. So am I mad at the board, for the ones that didn't vote for me? I don't know.
Well, I think I think we should make an attempt to try and get some interest. I think it will make the Board of Supervisors' job that much easier if this board can actively try and get some interest in serving. And then put forth some names. And I don't think it's up to us to decide, oh, well, we've got 3 people interested, we're gonna whittle it down to this one. I think we submit all 3 names, or if there's more, we submit them all to the Board of Supervisors and let them decide.
What if we don't want one?
Well, you know what, if you have an election, you might get somebody you don't want. So, but you know, that it's.
Maybe in helping the board out, if we give them 5 questions,
But I-
standardized questions that they have to answer.
But I think it's an opportunity for the board and for the general manager as well, because we're kind of a collective group that we really operate as a body. We don't operate as individuals. We have to work together to be successful. We may not always agree, but I think it's an opportunity to get people to understand in advance what the role is, what does the district do? An opportunity to sit down with the general manager, ask questions, but also to understand what the role is, as opposed to having that being done by the Board of Supervisors. And so that's where I think there's an opportunity for us. It's how do we get the word out to those individuals? So, you know, I posted on Templeton Proud, I'll probably post something else. I think maybe just doing something in the park. I can't do it this weekend. I'm out of town, but I would be willing to do it, you know, maybe the following weekend. And setting up a little table. I mean, or, you know, we spend time when we come up for a reelection, we go door to door and knock on doors and put flyers. Maybe there is something where we need a one-page kind of summary of what it is and what the process is and if people are interested. But we need to do something to kind of drum up interest. And I think it's to our benefit to do that, so that we have somebody who hopefully gets appointed who knows what they're signing up for and what's the role is.
I don't disagree with you.
Yeah, I
And if we get 10 people, and if we submit them all,
Yeah, I think-
and I'm not sure, you know, if there's somebody that the board member, a certain board member wants. And he's not on the list, they're gonna appoint that person. I mean, I don't know
Well, I think it's
how
up
politics
to,
work, but I think we should.
It takes 5 board members for them to appoint somebody. It's not gonna be.
yeah, it's not one in person, yeah. But I think at least then we have people who are interested, but they know what, because I think otherwise the Board of Supervisors, you know, it will be, the Board of Supervisors will be looking to John Pashon. Who's that person who lives in the district? And will that person have really kind of an understanding of what the role is?
Right, and so I understand you're saying to do all this stuff to drum up business and do all this stuff to educate them. My question is, are we making a recommendation? So number one is, yes, I agree with all of that. Let's all
I
do
would-
our best part. Number two is, do we make a recommendation, or like, do we give them 5 questions that they're each to answer, and then those questions get passed on to the board? Or do we just ask for their submittal of letters and then pass them all on to the board? Those are kind of like maybe 3 options I've come up with. I don't know, you have other thoughts, and you know, everybody else has other thoughts. But I'm just saying, I'm uncomfortable with making a recommendation.
I'm not looking for us to make a formal recommendation, but just saying, here's candidates.
Okay, so then they would show up at the October 4th meeting with their letter, introduce themselves, and then we would take all the people who were interested and pass it on, and we would have no formal recommendation.
Correct.
Okay, I'm in favor of that.
I'm just looking at, let's just send candidates to
Okay,
the Board of Supervisors, but you know, it's an opportunity for those candidates to
see the,
sit down with the general manager, you know, ask questions, get familiar with what the role is. But I think that's a better route than having, you know, really John Pashon blindly, you know, I mean, what is he gonna do? I think it puts him really in a bind. So I think that, but in the same process, I think there's an opportunity to hopefully get more interest in people attending the meetings and understanding what is really going on here. This is, you know, we're setting policies for the district. And we're really looking at how we spend people's tax dollars. So it would be nice to get some more interest. So that's just my thoughts, and I'm willing to, you know, put something together, which I can share at the next meeting.
But we probably don't have a lot of time.
No, we don't,
Yeah,
we don't.
'cause, so I guess the issue is if is the goal to generate candidates for the county to consider, then if you're not gonna do any vetting at all, then I would probably just say, okay, well, then we want to be the public relations campaign for the county's application process, whatever
Right.
it is. And I would reach out to them and say, how are people gonna figure this out? Where do you want them to go? And I would just direct people there. If you want to do some vetting, or I guess maybe there's one way of saying it by saying the Templeton CSD Board of Directors has an opportunity to make a recommendation. Direct these folks here. You choose to or you choose not to at that time. And maybe you say, we have 3 great people, we'd love for any of you to serve, and then that's your recommendation to the county and say, we did this process, we stirred up some interest. These 3 people said they were interested, we've met with them, we think any of them can do it. Please make your selection of the 3, something like that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, if you're not gonna vet them at all for then I don't know why they'd have to come here. I would just try to figure out how to get them to the county process.
Could do that,
I mean, I agree with it. We don't have the time.
yeah.
I mean, if it's gotta be to them by the 7th.
And when you say to the county, they would have to show up at the Board of Supervisors.
I haven't,
You'll follow up.
well, yeah, I'll follow up. It depending on what you wanna do here. I haven't not talked to John Basham intentionally, because I wanted to see if you wanted to have a pretty active role in this, I wanted to tell him, oh, our board's we're gonna find somebody to give to you. To make a recommendation to you. But if you're not comfortable with that, and you really do want the county board of supervisors to make that decision kind of out of your hands, and you think their role is just to generate the interest, we can do that, and we'll just direct people to the county. Now, I do,
I mean.
and
when we
nobody's
go through-
here, so,
When we go through an election process, it's out of our hands
Right.
too.
yeah, it is,
Look,
absolutely.
we got Wayne back.
It's out of your
They saw my
hands.
name and they said,
I mean,
that's
like-
it, we don't need to.
I guess I'd say it's out of your hands, kind of and kind of not, but it's out of the board's hands. But you as individuals all have an opportunity to have influence by the way you vote, or who you might campaign for, or who you might talk to your constituents about.
Well,
So,
that's not really true. I mean, I remember when we had a lot of people running. You had a thing here in the boardroom where you had all of the candidates come in and you had all of the department heads here and they gave their,
Spill.
the
yeah,
Yeah, but then it
dog and
was up
pony
to,
show and all of that. So,
but then it was up to the public to vote.
well, yeah.
I do think there's one other thing that to keep in mind is while it's discouraging that we didn't have anybody run for this seat,
Hey, what do you mean?
the second seat. No. This is different. Some people, and maybe a significant number of people, might be willing to serve, but don't want any part of the campaigning or that part of the process. This is a way of getting a 4-year term without dealing with that at all. Right? They just throw their name in the hat and they either get it or not. There's no campaigning. They don't have to answer those questions from the public, or they're
The
not.
press.
Yeah, the press, whatever. They're not gonna be invited to any forums. Well, I guess whatever you do, or whatever the county decides to do, but there's no campaigning involved here. So it's possible that somebody who might have been turned off by the campaigning component might be willing to serve and do a good job, knowing that there's no risk of that at all.
Thoughts? Does the board want to make a recommendation or at least send
Yeah, I
names
mean, I
of
think we
candidates
should,
to?
yeah, I mean. We should try
Yeah.
to let people know that this position is available, and then we'll just see how many candidates we get. And I mean, to me, it'd be nice to meet the people and talk with them. And as general manager said, maybe we just say all 3 of you guys are great, and here's a recommendation to board. So, but at least we gotta get some interest. So let's start with that.
I would encourage the board to take an active role and then make a recommendation. It's just, I knocked on doors, I talked to people, and just nobody was in people who were connected. Just not interested. So I think we should, I would be my recommendation to do so, to do a campaign, and even at that meeting, have the decision. If there's 3 or 4 people, great. We'll be lucky if we get 1. So,
Yeah, yeah.
that's kind of where I'm thinking this will go, and if we get 1 and we can say, hey, this person is interested and we support them, great. That would be my recommendation.
And we don't have to make the decision on whether we're gonna make a recommendation at the very end anyways.
So let's.
No, I think this could be pitched as we're generating interest, and we like to invite anyone who's interested to come to a specific meeting. The board may make at that time, may make a recommendation to the board of supervisors.
So is the board comfortable? I'm out of pocket the rest of the week, but is the board, and part of next week, is the board comfortable if I work with the general manager on this? To look at some questions on what we would put together for candidates who would be expressing interest, and then we'll bring it back to the next meeting and share kind of our game plan.
I think I don't know that we can, I think we need
There's
to get
not a lot
the,
we can do.
I think we need to get the word out sooner than the
Well,
next meeting.
well, I think in the meantime is the board can get the word out, and have individuals contact you for questions.
Yeah, I was thinking we need to get some sort of a written document that's available for
Yeah.
people to read and say, oh, hey, there's an opening on the board, here's what it entails. Oh, they're asking for a letter of interest by such and such date. And then you'd have really until then to determine if you wanted to interview them or anything like
So do you have the time to do that?
that. Yeah, no, I was planning on
Okay.
putting like a one-page kind of thing, I'm nothing too complicated, but that would be sent out to all of our, like, all of our youth. Parks and Recreation, parents, all the email lists we have, the website.
You sent that brochure that you used 8 years ago or whatever that you gave out to the candidates, I mean, that means if somebody professes they're interested, you can.
Yeah, I could meet with anybody and go through as much detail as they like. I don't have it like updated, but I have the stuff that we provided to candidates forums in the past. But I think that we just want to make it known that there's this opportunity. And then really you'd have, if you want to discuss this again at your next meeting, you can, at least that'll be out of the way.
Yeah,
Because I don't want the time frame to be so short that the candidate doesn't have time to think about whether they want to do it or
I mean,
not.
I would say that they have an October 7th, that we should get that at least 10 days before that.
Yeah,
to
so
the-
your
well,
meeting is,
just
your
one
meeting's,
thing.
your meeting's October 4th. So I was thinking that if we were gonna get a letter of interest, we'd request it by the 28th, and then it'd be in your board packet for your October 4th meeting. And then, but it wouldn't be, they wouldn't be required with a letter of interest, they could also just show up on the 4th. I mean, you might not have anybody, right now we have nobody. So I think we need to be flexible about who you want to rally.
so why don't you go ahead and kind of come up with a one-page kind of advertisement, if you will, and send it to all of the emails that you have in your contacts with the
We'll get
chamber.
that started.
Okay. All right, any further discussion on this topic?
And I will be here on the 20th.
Okay, I got your schedule. Okay, then let's move on to the general manager's report.
Okay, I get some notes here. Just a reminder, due to the continued excessive heat warning, we have postponed the staff appreciation lunch that was scheduled this Thursday until the 29th. I've heard from some of you that you're probably not gonna be able to make it. Hopefully a couple of you can. And we'll stay in touch. Living the Dream fundraiser's back. It's gonna be on Saturday, October 8th. I think 97 tickets have already been sold, so if you'd like to come, please get a ticket sooner than later. They're available at Parks and Recreation. I believe we're expecting to sell 160. It's in the past, but we haven't had this event for a few years. But in the past, it's always sold out couple weeks before the event. Cleanup Day is scheduled for September 24th for Templeton. It does not coincide this year with the countywide effort as far as date, that's on the 17th, but that happened to already be scheduled for picture day for youth soccer.
Okay.
So we're doing the following. Those are the items that I had.
So I have a question, with all this hot weather, how is it affecting our ability to treat the wastewater? Because I know in the past, it's created a lot of excess algae.
Yeah, I've not heard of an algae, we don't have a bloom right now, that can change. We've had problems both at the wastewater plant and at Selby in the past during both hot weather and just long periods of daylight. We may be somewhat fortunate that this is happening now, with, there's a couple of hours less of daylight than there is in the beginning. So, I would say I'm pleased to report that as of the moment, we haven't experienced a lot of complications. But this heat wave is now forecast to last like through Friday, so that'll be about 10 days total. Pretty long. And power problems tend to build. The longer it stays hot, the hotter it is overnight, the more likely transformers go out, so forth and so on. We have not, fortunately, experience localized problems, but that's not to say that the next few days won't become challenging. Our biggest concern is power outages, extended power outages. But so far we've done okay. Haven't had any lift station pumps or wells or anything else. Those also can be challenged with the heat. We haven't had a problem, but it's not good that this has been this hot for this long.
Okay.
They're suggesting now we're gonna get another one next week.
Yeah. Any questions for the general manager? Hey, committee,
I do have one question. There was 4 or 5 years ago when we had a lot of fires that we've had every year. But we sent staff to some of the fires, and that was criticized by some individuals about leaving our Templeton unprotected. I don't know what Tom's feelings were on that, or
Well, we have a different, back at the time, we were still, for after hours, we were dependent on folks returning to the station to go to the calls or volunteering to stay here. So the model's quite a bit different now. We've been invited, I think, 4 or 5 times to participate this summer in out of county area assignments, and we have not gone when we couldn't confirm we had adequate coverage on the assigned shifts. The fire chief did send a crew last Wednesday night to the fire in Southern California, but only upon confirmation that we were able to staff the next 14 days here without those 4 folks. And so far that's worked out okay. We've had folks on staff, but it's challenging because we're a small organization. So the pool is just a little bit thinner when that occurs.
okay.
okay, any other questions? Okay, any questions regarding the committee reports in the packet? There's the Park and Recreation and Refuge Committee and the NASI Commission. Any questions? Yes, Director Giardini.
I had a question on the book room. No, I had a comment. Studios on the Park in Paso Robles. They run a program for the youth in Atascadero for art programs, and maybe pass on to Melissa. I know the contacts up there, and Gladden and a few other the people up there. They might be interested in running the program, and it's a phenomenal program. If you go in and you can see the kids' stuff hung up way in the back, they might be interested in doing like something every now and then at our area here.
I'll share that. I just learned that we just added a youth
Right, it's.
a youth art program once a month in that building. So
Right.
I'm not sure if it's related or not, but we just added
And
that.
they specifically target you.
Okay, yeah, I'll specifically mention studios in the park.
And then question on the homelessness in the park. I don't think there's anything we can do about that unless they stay overnight, correct?
Yeah, I mean, we just wanted to alert the committee, and by the way, the committee, the board, that we just observed more. It's not really been a problem. But it's a new issue. It's not something we've experienced before. Right now, our issues like parking and vehicles down there, but they are mostly good about moving them out of the park overnight. But we may end up with having to do some more parking enforcement. Yeah, we do have some, what appears to be folks that are primarily living out of their cars that are parking in the parks during the daytime. And using the facilities.
Any other comments on committee reports? We do not have a tag report at this time. Okay. In terms of staff reports, there's an engineering, finance, and fire and emergency, park and recreation and solid, and then utilities. So those are in your packet as well. Any comments, Director Fardonish?
I have a couple of questions. One on the engineering, under source control. So I guess we're having some problems with Barrel House. I thought they already bought the equipment and they were in the process of installing.
Yeah, they have equipment out there. It's really an issue of reporting and Their permit requires them to make certain, take certain samples and report that information to us, and
And then
they've fallen behind on their
And
reporting.
what stage are they at? Notice of violation, which, we have different.
Yeah,
stages.
that's because they like ignored emails and I shouldn't say ignore, that's not my more choice of words. They haven't responded to emails or phone calls from our team.
So, okay, somebody going there and talking with them?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a process.
And then as far as the fire department, I just wanna recognize and congratulate our fire captains, Captain Wall and Goldblum, for completing the arson investigation, so. Just let's hear about that, please.
That's good to know. Thank you for calling that out. Any other comments, questions? Okay, and director reports and or comments on any meetings that any director might have attended or any comments in general? Okay. Then we will close to our any comments from the public before we close or adjourn our meeting? Okay, thank you for that. We'll adjourn then to closed session. I do want to thank those members of the public for calling in this evening. And hope that you do call in every first and is it third Tuesday of the month. I know these meetings can be a little dull at times, but it takes some time. I know from my own experience, it takes some time to get up to speed. So do appreciate your interest and hope that you continue to participate. So thank you and have a good evening.